we're going to ensure that we have a safe inauguration, that President-elect Joe Biden, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are sworn in as the new President and Vice President of the United States in a manner consistent with our history, with our traditions, in a way that gives honor to the American people and to the United States.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence there just last hour on the efforts to ensure a safe inauguration. FBI Director Chris Wray confirmed that his agency is concerned about the potential for violence next week. Federal authorities are warning militia groups and racist extremists could be targeting the event. According to an intelligence briefing obtained by the New York Times, some extremists are aiming to trigger a race war. For more on this, I'm joined now by Nicholas Grossman. He's a political science professor at the University of Illinois, the senior editor of Arc Digital, and an expert on U.S. national security. Hi, Professor. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
When it comes to the potential threats and the online information that the FBI, for example, is now pointing to and say exists, any of that surprise you, or should national security agencies have seen it coming?
Sort of a mix, that there were a lot of signs that a problem was heading this way, that the United States has a far-right extremist problem, that a far-right domestic terrorism problem. And you could see some of this, for example, in 2020, towards the end, the FBI broke up a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, and where the plotters had considered whether they were going to execute her over live stream. And this is the sort of thing that probably should have been a sign for some of the Capitol attack, that I and many others who analyze national security think that there is at least a decent chance that that's what some of the attackers were after, with perhaps after Vice President Pence or Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. And so part of that was able to see coming, but I have to admit, I did not specifically see a attack on the Capitol. It is clear, though, that the police protection of it was nowhere up to par. And there were a lot of different signs from online chatter, from people being pretty open about it. What's almost shocking about it is how open people were about planning it.
I know that you've written extensively about how the events of last week kind of woke up the national security apparatus. Do you think that will lend itself to, fingers crossed, a better outcome during inauguration?
I think so, that you can see where there were less than, I think it was 2,000 Capitol Police that were trying to protect it, and now there are about 20,000 National Guard deployed around DC. There are a number of arrests also that the FBI has made. The Department of Homeland Security, along with the Department of Justice and the National Counterterrorism Center, had both released a bulletin that was warning of far-right domestic extremists. It named a bunch of them, talked about Boogaloo, and which are accelerationists, basically trying to create a civil war, that different other ones by name specifically, and that they're more on the lookout for it. It makes for a militarized Washington, which at some level I find pretty sad, but also at this point seems to be necessary.
You zeroed in on QAnon specifically. For people who aren't necessarily well versed in how that ties to what we've seen unfold, what can you tell us?
Well, to explain the actual thing, I mean, I don't even know if they understand the whole thing. It's such a sprawling, crazy conspiracy theory. But the core idea of it is that the United States, really the whole world, is controlled secretly by a cabal of child sex trafficking, pedophile Satan worshipers, and that President Trump was secretly fighting them behind the scenes and sending messages to these followers via anonymous posts on, through somebody they call Q, via anonymous posts on anonymous image boards like, say, 8chan, kind of darker corners of the internet. And a lot of them seem to be kind of playing at it. There are quite a few of the people who just seem to be into trying to break down these puzzles, almost like a game with friends. But there are also a lot that are very serious. And so I started worrying in 2020 that if Trump loses, that some of these people who are thinking of him not as a president, but kind of as a messiah, are going to have a lot of trouble accepting that. Because it's not an electoral loss. It is the triumph of evil, in their vision of it. And so I've been worrying about that for some time. And it seems like what a lot of them really underestimated is that a lot of these conspiracy theories thought, say, the FBI, the CIA, whoever, was going onto their internet chat discussions and trying to give them false information. And the national security state, law enforcement, doesn't care about that stuff. But they very much do care about a attack on the U.S. government to try to disrupt a U.S. electoral process. Using violence to try to,
No, pardon me, go ahead, my apologies.
Using violence to try to disrupt a execution of U.S. law is under U.S. code called sedition. And I don't think a lot of them realize that that's what they were participating in. And so while they were wrong to be paranoid before, they're probably not so wrong now.
I guess what I wondered, especially when you talked about the role of President Trump, obviously in the lead up to what happened last week, and what he was impeached for yesterday, he said things that incited their behavior, right? He confirmed the theories that they were spreading about the election and propagated them. In the past few days, and maybe even since a few days after what happened last week, his message has changed. He's urging them not to be violent. Do you think that makes any difference whatsoever, though?
Not really. I mean, maybe at the edges. The weird part is not only does with, say, QAnon, maybe it does cause some of them perhaps to be disillusioned, but some of the more hardcore militias are treating it as, well, okay, I guess he's not the guy we thought he was. That they thought that they were following some sort of, revolutionary that was going to, so it's not the conspiracy theorists, but the militias, was basically going to overthrow United States democracy. And when he started doing things like when he would wink at this, say during the 2017 Charlottesville rally, it was called Unite the Right rally, where you could see a lot of Nazi flags, Confederate flags, and a counter-protester was killed. That afterwards he kind of winked at them, he called them very fine people, and then he walked it back a little, and then he supported them again. And so a lot of the people who were looking at his messages and treating them as kind of coded encouragement thought that that's what he was doing then. And then when they were storming the Capitol and they were thinking that here it is, this is the moment that we've been waiting for, then to see him kind of hedge, I think a few of them got disillusioned. But the problem with conspiracy theories is that they can always just take it up another level. Oh, he's just saying that to try to manipulate XYZ. And so probably it will continue metastasizing with or without him.
Okay, that's actually my final question for you. And I unfortunately just have a few seconds, but I am very interested in your perspective on what happens beyond after the president leaves office and how much of an issue this is going to be in particular for national security.
I think the government with that recent bulletin is probably right that this is a very serious domestic terrorism threat, that far-right terrorism in the United States has killed decently more people than jihadist terrorism, for example, over the last 10 years, and so will likely be a problem. But since I and others have been advocating addressing that problem for some time, now that the federal government is going to bring a lot of forces to bear on it, while hopefully being very careful not to overreach, but bring a lot of forces to bear on it, it will hopefully mitigate the problem somewhat. And Trump being out of power will at least dampen some of these fantasies that they're about to take over the country.
Okay, Professor, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.